Warm welcome to our podcast series that is The Greener Side. It's a podcast to uncover and discuss the topics that strongly influence our lives, ranging from water, environment, climate, finance, research, and media. In view of this, our guest speaker are individuals or organizations who are passionately active and knowledge expert of these diverse sectors. We are on a journey to understand the challenges and potential solutions for moving onto the greener side, and you're welcome to hop on. So let us begin with the episode 5 of the greener side. Today we'll explore how cutting edge technology is reshaping conservation efforts. So join us as we speak about the world of drones, AI, citizen science, and whatnot. So I'm Rishikesh Patil, and I welcome our today's esteemed guest, Dr. Pankaj Koparde, in this podcast. Hello, Dr. Pankaj.
Thank you, Rishikesh. Thanks for inviting me here.
Yeah. So briefly, I'll talk about Dr. Pankaj. So Dr. Pankaj is an evolutionary ecologist working as an assistant professor with the Department of Environmental Studies at MIT WPU Pune. His core expertise is in subjects such as evolutionary ecology, urban ecology, biogeography, biodiversity informatics, and science communication. He is an admin of two mega citizen science projects. Those are Dragonfly South Asia and Owl India. He is a TEDx speaker, DST Young Scientist Awardee, Severs Rising Star for Conservation, Prakriti and Earthwatch Fellow. Simultaneously, he is an IUCN contributor too, and he is actively engaged in research benefiting on-ground conservation. He is a member of several government committees, international organizations, and works as an ecological consultant and subject matter expert with various corporate organizations. He is a published Marathi writer with a major interest in literary essays, that is Lalit Sahitya. His lab group is known as Chatur Ullu Lab, denoting the offbeat research. So Dr. Koparde and his team, so they're doing research work on dragonflies, that is Chatur, and owls, that is Ullu. So once again, I welcome Dr. Pankaj Koparde to our today's podcast.
So, thanks a lot.
Yeah. So, Dr. Pankaj, so shall we start with the podcast session? Yeah. So, my first question is how this technology is transforming the field of conservation and what are the different tools they are being used?
Okay. So I think it's a very loaded question. Thanks for asking that. There are so many developments happening in the wildlife research, wildlife biology field today, and a lot of tools and techniques people are using now. So just to mention a few, so we all know about camera traps for tigers. We all know about CCTV monitoring for wildlife that happens. Perhaps in the Discovery or Nat Geo channel, we must have seen about turtles being tracked using GPS tags. Some of the big animals, marine animals, have been tracked using these GPS tags, which are posted on their back. So these are happening. We have passive acoustic monitors which are deployed in the field, which are continuously recording the animal sounds, which can be then analyzed using soundscape ecology and different tools. We also have advent of genetics. There are new genetics tools available with which a person can look at population genetics, look at population connectivity, can identify, detect some rare species in the field such as tiger and other predators. Also, we have development in the field of remote sensing and GIS. With the drones coming in picture now, we can have very high resolution images of landscape which can inform about the changes happening to the landscape, which can inform about the restoration progress and how it really, affects ecosystem. So all in all, there is a huge diversity of tech available, and of course, a lot of applications out there.
Fantastic. Great. So, related to the first question, you can call it as a subsequent question for the continuing the line. So,
Yeah.
what specific problems in conservations are near tools are able to solve that were previously difficult to address? Now, how this new techniques are helping?
Okay, yeah. So I think that take basically enables you to collect more data, and
Okay.
it gives you insights about something. So
Mhm.
let us take an example of perhaps camera traps, which I think most of the audience may be aware of. So camera traps have been deployed in many protected areas in India and even abroad in many places. So camera traps basically capture the animal when it is passing through that area. Okay. So with multiple such images, we can actually track the movement of animals. And here we are talking about animals, not just one particular species, but many such species, right? So this actually gives you real-time data about the movement pattern in animals, the kind of temporal utilization of the time utilization they have, so that we can see. Very recently, I saw a footage from a camera trap in which they showed in one particular place, you have leopard visiting. After a few hours, you have tiger visiting the same place. In between, you have a sloth bear coming and going through. And there
Okay.
is a scat. There is, a scat of an animal, and everyone is basically smelling that scat. So they know there is a presence of another animal.
Okay.
Not just that, in the afternoon time, a shepherd comes with goats, and they are having, the goats are feeding there. So there is a coexistence, which this story we wouldn't have got if we wouldn't have seen that footage. So similarly, camera trap is one of the things, but there are many such tools and techniques available which are giving you more and more insights about the wildlife, their behavior, their ecology, their movement patterns, threats to them. And we are getting this first-hand information and in the real-time manner so that now we can act better. So I think that is, the big achievement that today's tech is giving us.
Yeah, fantastic. Just getting an information about this overlapping territories. So that is fantastic, I guess.
Yes.
So nowadays we have heard much about the RSGIS, and along with the RSGIS, nowadays we are using drones as well to get the images
Yes.
or to record certain evidences. So my
Yeah.
next question is pertaining to RSGIS and drones. How
Mhm.
this RSGIS and drones being used for wildlife monitoring and habitat protection, and what advantages do they offer compared to the traditional monitoring methods?
Okay. Again, thanks a lot for that question. So remote sensing and GIS, in short RSGIS, has been developed from the, I think, last 30 to 40 years of time. The drones is the recent addition, and with the less cost of drones nowadays, almost anyone can buy a drone and can fly it and can capture, landscape images and also some very beautiful images of crowd and people and canopies and so on. So there are a lot of applications of drones as such. But let me first discuss about remote sensing and GIS. So the satellites which are rotating around Earth, revolving around the Earth, so they are capturing high resolution landscape images. And these we can actually see on our smartphone in the form of Google Earth, right? So we can see those images. If we could analyze these images over a period of time, we can actually find out if the landscape is changing. Okay, so that is a big tool or big power that we have right now. We can actually look at the detection of the change which is happening in the landscape and land use. Okay, we can detect if the restoration is making any change. We can detect if forest fire is making any change. We can detect if the climate change that we are talking about is making any change to the landscape, and of course all the elements which that landscape posts. So that is a very big power that the remote sensing and GIS is giving us. Secondly, I would say that remote sensing and GIS does not stop there. If you could have layers of animals or wildlife GPS tagged layers on it, you can now track them. You can see where do they occur, where do they go, where do they migrate, where do they move, and which are the areas potentially they might be present. Okay. So this also helps us in conservation planning, in delineating the protected area network, and also identifying corridors for wildlife movement. Drones are actually giving you much higher resolution pictures. So if you want to quantify vegetation, if you want to quantify perhaps soil cover, rock cover, these things are possible with the drones. Not just that, drones have been used for tracking some animals, like the big animals like elephants, rhinoceros, or even some canopy dwelling apes. These have been tracked using drones and they can actually do population estimate.
Okay.
Now, further addition to this, and a twist also, is the introduction of AI. Introduction of AI in population monitoring. So people have been developing tools in which AI can detect individual of a species and can tell you the numbers of them. So for example, they have taken images from the poles, and now they are measuring the number of penguins which are there in the colony.
Right.
This is otherwise not possible for a person to actually go and visit, right?
Yes.
So on foot, these are very difficult things to do. But with satellite images, with drones, this is possible. So we ourselves conducted some studies. Remote sensing GIS has a very wide application as such.
Yeah.
There are very sophisticated tools developed. One of the tools nowadays also calculates carbon sequestration. So if you could get the forest cover, if you could get the biomass, you can actually also go for soil carbon sequestration.
Yeah.
So we did one study very recently in which we looked at Pune city and what are the changes that has happened to the city in the last 20 years of time. So we found that there is a drastic reduction of around 34% of carbon storage in the Pune city. And the main reason, of course, is the urbanization, the rapid buildup that has come up. So which has basically reduced the carbon sequestration capacity of the city. Not just that, it has also increased the flood risk in the city due to various changes happening to the topography of it.
Okay.
So this is all remotely sensed data. And you have to do some ground truthing, you have to do some accuracy testing, and you can figure out. But remotely sensed data and drone-based data is really making amazing kind of discoveries in the field of wildlife as well as urban ecology.
Okay. So I just want to understand, compared to last, say, 5 years, 5 year span. So, what is the rate at which we are using all this technology? Suppose it was like, say, 25 to 30% before, say, 5 years. So now, what percentage you would like to quote?
Okay. All right. So it's difficult to say, but I would say, yeah, I mean, there's 30% at least people are using more and more high-tech sort of instruments.
Okay.
There are some instruments we use routinely, but the newer and newer integration of technology is happening at a very high rate. So
Achha.
even if you say 30% in 5 years is still a large amount of change which is happening. There are of course some limitations. Perhaps we'll come to that later.
Yeah.
But yeah, people are using.
Great. So now my question is related to genetics. So genetics was, say, like 10 years back, it was like a word which was used by everyone and everyone in our generation. So they used to talk about genetics. I want to pursue some career in genetics. Now I just want to ask how this genetics can be used as a tool for the conservation. And can you tell us about any case study which is related to use of genetics into the conservation practices?
Okay. Yeah, so genetics has been developed from the last 10 to 20 years of time. And if you look at the cost of sequencing DNA fragments, it has lowered much below what it was 20 years back. So it has become more accessible. People are using it. There are a lot of established wildlife labs which are using genetics routinely. So generally you use for detection of some rare endangered species based on their excreta, their scats. So typically for tiger detection, genetics is very widely used, even for leopard and other carnivore detection. So scats are used. Not just that, for data analysis, you can use it. So if you could have excreta of animals and you do genetics on it, you'll get to know what are things that animal has eaten. So even you can do the diet analysis, which is otherwise very difficult to do.
Right.
You can look at also the parasite load. You can look at if there are any diseases that the animal is having through just looking at the excreta and the disease load over there.
Yeah.
So that's possible. People also use genetics to recover evolutionary relationships. And by evolutionary relationships, I'm saying that if how close animals are with each other with respect to the evolutionary timescale, so that you can recover using the genetics. So this study is called as phylogenetics study. And people have used this very extensively nowadays because there are a lot of species which look similar, but they are found to be different genetically. So there is cryptic speciation. So whenever you identify a new species, of course, the whole conservation dimension would be applied to it, and you start from zero there. So it definitely really helps in the conservation. So with this, I will talk about a case study that we did during my doctoral thesis. So I worked on the owlets of India. So
Yeah.
owlets are the small sized owls. And there is one spotted owlet that we generally see around urban areas. So many of you might have seen it. This is like a white gray colored small owl. And they are generally in groups, like you will see them like 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 of them together. And when you spot them, they will start staring at you and they will start bobbing their head. So it's a very funny, cute little bird. So this particular bird belongs to a genus called Athene. Okay. And the species name is Brahma. So we call it Athene Brahma. Athene is a Greek goddess, and she had an owl as a vehicle. So that's why that genus came in. And Brahma is Brahma as per the Hindu mythology. So this bird has got a very, sort of a mythological significance, I would say. So I worked on a bird called forest owlet, which is
Right.
endangered bird and found in central India. Again, this is another interesting bird because there was not much known about this bird. It was classified in Heteroglox bleviti, Heteroglox genus and bleviti species. So this bird was first described in 1872. And there were some records till 1873, after which the bird was not recorded for a very long period of time. Until 1997, when a couple of American researchers, Dr. Pamela Rasmussen and Mr. Ben King, they rediscovered the species in Maharashtra. So this was after almost 113 years of gap that the bird was almost not known, and suddenly it was found. So a lot of people started working on it. I primarily worked on the genetics of it. So we collected the first-hand data on genetics. We did the phylogenetic studies. We did extensive phylogenetic studies rather, and we compared a lot of owls with this particular species. Turned out that Heteroglox, which was supposed to be a monotypic genus, meaning globally there was only one species representing Heteroglox. Okay, so the forest owlet was not just endangered, but it was also evolutionarily very distinct because it was only one species belonging to heterogenus, Heteroglox. So with our phylogenetic study, we found that it is very close to Athene Brahma, the spotted owlet. Okay. So, but of course, morphologically, they look very different. Their habits are different, their habitats are different. However, phylogenetically, they are very close. And that also makes sense because all of them, they coexist in the same landscape. So that really makes much sense actually. So when we published our data, when we published this research, there was a lot of revision in the taxonomy of this species. And there is a global list of evolutionary distinct and globally endangered birds, which is published by the ZSL, Zoological Society of London. And they have ranked forest owlet on the 7th number in the globally evolutionary distinct and globally endangered species list. After we published our study, the rank 7 basically went much, much lower because the species was no more evolutionary distinct. So there was a complete revision to its taxonomy, to its phylogeny, and it changed the conservation status of the bird. Okay, globally. So this is actually one of the ways that genetics contributes towards conservation. Secondly, there are a lot of studies on tigers, especially the population genetics of tigers. Population genetics will tell you about if there is population differentiation happening in the tiger population, because we know tigers are almost, across India now. They are in the northeast, they are in the central India, in the western Ghats, down south, they are in the northwest. So they are almost everywhere. But do the populations of tiger are different or are the same single population, right? So this is a question a lot of population geneticists were asking. They collected samples, they found some sort of signatures of differentiation. So genetics really helps us to go deeper and understand better. So that is how the genetics really helps in conservation. It can also tell you if having small population will have risks associated with some diseases in the form of inbreeding depression or genetic disorders, so that we can manage the wildlife population accordingly.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it's a much wider, sort of discussion it can lead to.
Definitely. So next point, so what we feel, so this citizen science, we come across this particular word many times in a day. Okay. So I just want to know, or my audience would like to know about what is citizen science and how can everyday people contribute to the conservation efforts through the technology.
Okay. So citizen science is when citizens get involved in scientific data collection. So it's a very simple definition. So anyone who is having interest in the experiment or in the project can get involved in this. And you don't really need any prior training. You just need to understand the project. That's all you need. So typically, like we are running some huge citizen science project, mainly on the dragonflies and owls and some on birds, in which we give a basic training to the citizens, whoever is participating, and then they start collecting data. Now, all this data goes into a platform. So it could be a global recognized platform, or it could be locally sourced platform. But essentially, it is collected somewhere, this whole data. And this data eventually is analyzed by researchers to find out patterns and can answer questions, ecological questions related to taxa or related to habitats. Okay, so that is how the citizen science basically works. So we have some of the examples like the eBird, which is established by a Cornell Lab of Ornithology in USA, which is having massive data now. And now with that data, perhaps it is 20, 30 years old data that they have been collecting. They can come up with migration patterns in birds. They can look at real-time changes happening to the bird populations or bird sightings. And it has given a lot of publications, a lot of data towards the ornithology. Similarly, we are doing dragonfly work in which a lot of citizens are involved. The Dragonfly South Asia has more than 10,000 participants.
Oh, really?
We call them as dragon folks. Yes. And these are all across South Asia, even starting from Pakistan, Nepal, Myanmar, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Sri Lanka. So all these countries, they are participating, they are depositing their data on iNaturalist project. And we can now analyze and understand the patterns and processes in the odonates. So citizens just need to have interest, basic interest to get involved. And with a proper channel, if they go through, it will be really fun for them. Yes.
Okay. So what challenges you come across while involving citizens into the project and give them a training about using a technology? So what challenges do you face?
Okay. So I would say there are mainly two challenges. The first challenge is about the errors in the data. Okay, the citizen science collect data, but sometimes there are error in the data. So the data errors could be with respect to the species identification. So if they are taking some pictures of some, let's say some dragonflies, and they are not able to identify it properly, that could introduce one error in the database.
Yes.
The second type of an error might be in the form of geotagging. So if they have not given the GPS location data properly, or if there is some problem with their GPS unit or GPS machine, then it gives you a wrong location data, or the date when they submit this data, if that again they make an error, that could be an error. But these errors we solve by using our expert panels. So basically we are onboarding some expert people in that field, and they actually resolve these errors by checking observations.
Okay.
So every observation can go through a peer review, and then it basically becomes research data. So not all the citizen science data can be used. Some data is discarded. Okay, so that is one of the points I wanted to make. Second point is involving citizens in the process of citizen science. So in that case, first of all, it might be difficult, but once the wheel is started running, you just need some push to keep it going. So citizens, when they really get involved in these projects, they go on their own and they can actually make a significant change.
Okay, interesting. There are two last questions. So second last question is, how can conservationists address the ethical challenges while utilizing the benefits of technology?
Okay. So yeah, so technology, of course, comes with some responsibility towards it.
Yeah.
So for example, if you are using passive sound recorders to detect some species of, let's say, birds, nocturnal animals, then you have to deploy these sound recorders in the forest. And it also means that you have to take full responsibility to also retrieve them, get the data, analyze the data, and again deploy them. So this has to be a regular thing. So you cannot simply put those instruments out there and forget about it. So that's one thing. Secondly, you need all the different types of ethical permissions when you conduct these surveys. So of course there are state forest department, central forest department permissions that one need. But apart from that, you may also need permission from the State Biodiversity Board if you are collecting some specimens or some material.
Right.
And this has to be done in hand with the main stakeholder of the forest, which are the people and the forest department. So these are actually some of the ethical guidelines that the tech people should follow. Otherwise, the tech can really give you massive amount of data to process and analyze.
Definitely. So, what advice would you like to give to the aspiring conservationist interested in working with this cutting edge technology in this particular sector?
Okay. Okay, so yeah, I mean this is again a very, I think, a trick question rather. We are all good at giving advice, but we need to give a good advice, right? So let me think about it. So yeah, I mean there's a lot of tech available nowadays, and there are a lot of people who are also interested, or tech savvy people who might enter into this field. But I would say that the tech for wildlife is like a topping on your cake. Okay. So the cake is mainly made up of your experience, first-hand experience with the people, with the nature, the mountains, streams, the rivers, the lakes, the oceans, perhaps tigers, leopards, bears, fruits, flowers, anything which is out there. So this is the foundation. You need to understand the ecology, you need to understand the ecosystems where you are working, you need to understand the people who are living there before you actually blindly apply the tech anywhere, right? Because having tech will not solve the real problems on the ground.
That's
Tech
true.
is just one of the tools that you are using,
Hmm.
which will perhaps give you some data. But again, there's a lot of stakeholder engagement, there's a lot of people who are working on the ground. So making sense of the data and then applying it logically for the conservation action is the only advice I can give to the young people who are entering into this.
Yeah.
So the tech is there, make use of it, make best use of it, but at the same time, don't fly away from the ground realities.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Pankaj. And we look forward to work with you actual on field. Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
inputs. And I guess our audience are like, so they'll be very happy after listening to this particular podcast because you have explained all the aspects of what is conservation. So conservation is like people, they know how to conserve and what to conserve, but how technology can be used, how it is to be used, and how common person, so he who is not belonging to the conservation field, ecology, or biodiversity. So even if he wish to contribute, how he can contribute through this citizen science forum. Okay, so that was the fantastic contribution from your side. So we wish you all the best, and we look forward to meet you in person and to work with you on actual field. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Rishikesh. I really enjoyed this podcast, and thanks a lot for asking so many questions. I guess all the audience really enjoyed this conversation. Looking
Yes.
forward to it.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.